What's going on, Founder University? On today's episode, we have Jay Williams. He is the co-founder and CEO of a canned water brand called Freebird. Crazy industry, unbelievable conversation because this guy had an insane career for a couple decades in real estate development. He transitioned from real estate development to consumer packaged goods and canned water. He's growing an incredible brand. It's growing very quickly, which is awesome. So we cover everything about marketing strategy and brand strategy and distribution strategy and really what it means to be in this industry. Definitely stay towards the end of the episode because he actually shares a couple business ideas that he really likes and we sort of go back and forth trading ideas. So hopefully you gain inspiration from this, take some lessons to apply to your own business or even start your own business. So enjoy the episode. We'll speak soon. Yeah, Jay, thanks for jumping on. And I had to hit record because we were just chatting before we get into setup and you were about to spill the juice of why you're such an interesting character and why I wanted to have you on the pod and have a conversation with you. But yeah, thanks for jumping on. I look forward to the conversation and learning from you.
Well, obviously I'm grateful to be invited and I appreciate it. And I always love having great conversations with folks like yourself talking about business in general. And of course, whenever I can talk a little bit about what we're doing at Freebird as well. So can't wait.
Yeah, for sure. And for the listeners, I'll do a little bit of an intro so you don't need to pump your own tires too much. But Jay is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Freebird. You are in, to my eyes, one of the most interesting spaces right now is the canned water beverage industry, which has been really gaining a ton of traction with the success of Liquid Death and a bunch of other brands. So I'm excited to jump into that. But the other side of it for listeners is you had a very prolific career in real estate development, community development. And I'm excited to hear the story of like the transition from real estate development, which in most people's eyes is like the safe, successful, big money industry to the wild world of beverages, which I'm sure has been a big mindset shift for yourself. But I'm excited to hear the story of how that happened and what your thoughts are and plans for that as well.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, it's not every day that you see somebody go from real estate development to beverage. It's quite a jump. I would say first and foremost that I'm just an entrepreneur at heart. I was born that way. I can't be any other way. And so starting a new venture, even in a new category as foreign as beverage was compared to real estate, honestly is not particularly daunting for me. It would be different if it was a category that was very, very scientific or something where, there needed to be a background of knowledge that was much more vast. But so I'm very comfortable in the entrepreneurial space in general. But from the standpoint of real estate, yeah, I was in the real estate development business for over 20 years, building apartments and student housing all over the country. It's a great business. I don't have any ill feelings towards real estate. I just needed a change. Candidly, I was just a little tired of it. It's a tough business. It's a business that will most certainly beat you down over time. There's a lot of risk. It's not for the faint of heart. And so, while I have been fortunate to have a little success, along the way, I just needed to do something different. And I had been thinking about the beverage business forever. Don't ask me why, because I really don't know. It was
a big
just always,
consumer.
yeah, it just was something always in the back of my mind. I guess really because I enjoy the creative aspect of it. One of the biggest components of beverage, at least in the space I'm in, is the brand identity, the marketing, and sort of that creative side of things. And so I happen to have sort of this, unique brain, if you will, where I'm a little bit of, left brain, right brain at the same time. So I love the process. I love starting a company. I love all the components of that, but I also really love the creative side. And that's what really gets sort of my juices flowing, to use your term. So it actually is kind of a perfect a perfect business for me.
Yeah, for sure. And I see you living that brand and putting your own spin on it and how you get the word out there for Freebird. And we'll jump into that. But first I wanted to touch base on one thing you said right off the bat is your natural wiring. As an entrepreneur, that's just who you are. And I think a lot of people I speak to, and a lot of people who sort of listen to this podcast and are exposed to this, 95, 96, 99% of people are employees. That's just how the way the world works. There's not that many owners and founders. Um, from your side of it, like, what do you think separates people who have that entrepreneurial juice and have that sort of trigger? And maybe you started like that, but my side of it is like I was an employee for a decade, and I actually found that as a benefit. I always, in the back of my mind, wanted to start a business and be an entrepreneur and be my own boss. But being an employee, I was exposed to so many things and learned so quickly. Like if I started a job when I was 20, or started a company when I was 21 or 22, coming out of school, I would have been completely lost and failed on my face. When I had the skill set of sales or finance or marketing or whatever, because I was an employee, I found that was a huge advantage to myself. But from your take, do you think entrepreneurs are better served just sort of following their calling and just launching things? Or do you think it's people can transition from being an employee to a founder? Or what's your take on it?
I think both ways. I started my first company at 24. I'd worked for another company for just a few years as just starting out. But it's hard to explain. I guess it comes from a number of factors. So one thing I would say is you've got to have a tolerance for risk. If that's too daunting or too scary, then maybe it's not for you. I have what I always phrase as an uncomfortably comfortable tolerance of risk. I don't have any fear. And that's not because it's not because I'm just so good at what I'm doing. Cause I've had plenty of, low points in my career. Like everybody, you go up, you have ups and downs, but, I just, I just feel like I can figure it out. The water business is a perfect example for me to transition into a business that I knew nothing about and knew not one person, is a little bit insane, especially when you're, 25 years into your career. So to your question, I do feel like there's a different wiring there. Um, I, I talk to friends of mine, like you do, who think starting a company, I might as well have like designed a rocket ship. Like it's just so daunting, so
Yeah.
scary, so impossible. And I think the opposite. I feel
Yeah.
like that's easy. That's much easier for me than to go work for a company and have to adapt to somebody else's ideals of how things should be done and to have to basically work for them to make all the money and I just, get the salary and the benefits, which by the way, is fantastic. There's security in it. And like you said, 95% of the world operates that way. And I have a great respect for, people who, appreciate their roles and, work so hard with them. But for me personally, it's just something that I, I don't know how to explain it. I just knew immediately when I was younger in my career, like I can do this. And
Yeah.
by the way, there's a little bit of naivete with that,
Yeah.
but I feel like there's some what do you how would you call it? I think there's some positivity to being a little naive sometimes because it allows you to explore things that you might not otherwise do.
Yeah, 100%. No, there has to be this sort of blind confidence that you're going to be able to get things done, and yeah, a bunch of that what you just said sort of resonates with me. It's just a belief that you're going to be able to get it done and fix things. And I think the big thing that I see across entrepreneurs, especially early stage entrepreneurs, is just like the bias towards action of like, hey, we need to go do a marketing campaign. Okay, I'm going to learn how to do marketing. I'm going to come up with a brand. Hey, I need to go sell to big box chain. I'm okay, how do I find the buyer for water at Costco? Like, let's just go find it and do it. And I have very similar situations. I have friends who are accountants who work at the bank or lawyers or whatever. They've had great careers. And a lot of them are like, yeah, I'd love to start my own company. I don't know what I would do. I don't know how to start. Like, I don't know if I'll be able to make the same money that I'm making right now. And it's always the same excuses. And they're all legitimate excuses because as you grow your career, your expenses increase and you got to have that money coming in the door. Um, But the answer is just like, just start. If you don't have an idea, go come up with ideas, go think about things, write them down, come up with different things. And I always say, just try something on the side. Like this, my business now, Talently, is like my fifth business I've tried. And all the other ones were little ones on the side while I had a job. And I think
Yeah.
through that process, you realize one, it's not rocket science. And that was the big hurdle for myself as I'm like, oh shit, like I got to incorporate a company. How do I do that? Oh, I got to run payroll. How do I do that? And it's like all these little things add up and it becomes such a mental hurdle. But when you run your first business, my first business was, I thought there was a huge opportunity to build a brand around estate sales. Sounds like a ridiculous concept, but I'm like, all these houses are selling. No one wants to get rid of their junk. Facebook Marketplace was blowing up at the time. I'm like, why isn't there a known brand in the estate sale world? I started emailing real estate agents. I landed my first client in like a week. And I went in with my dad. I'll always remember this. I went in with my dad's clipboard, my dad's camera, and I went and took pictures and itemized the whole house and told the real estate agent that we'll get back to him in 24 hours with the price out list of how much we can sell everything for. I quickly realized I fucking hated that business. It was brutal. It was brutal. I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
want to sell people old junk. Like it was crazy. But to the point about starting is like, I just did it and realized if how to do it or if I was going to like it or not like it.
That to me, that's the best way. And it sounds almost reckless just
Yeah.
to start, but it's the best way to get your feet wet, to like literally to just learn. Because you're like you said, you learned in probably 10 minutes. You're there taking pictures of somebody's stuff in their house, and you're like, oh my god, what am I doing? You know, and but you before that, it was just a concept in your head that you thought of all the good things about it. You were thinking about the positives, like, oh well, nobody's put any organization to this, and this could be great, and blah 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 blah. And that's the way it should be, because there are plenty of ideas. I mean, I have a whole folder of ideas. Like
Yeah.
I can't stop. And trust me, not all of them are good ones. But once you do something like that, even if it's on the side, which quite frankly is a really smart thing to do for, say, a young person thinking about going out on their own, like you said, start a little side hustle and just get into it a little bit to realize, what you like, what you don't like, and also just how do you feel about it? Like if all of a sudden you realize, like you said, like this isn't that hard. I can do this.
Yeah.
Incorporating a company, not that hard. Figuring out the budget, not that hard. So it's a lot of trial and error. But for me personally, and I know plenty of others out there. There's nothing better than when you do that, and especially when it works. It's so fulfilling. It's
Yeah.
not easy, but it's incredibly fulfilling. And to be honest with you, I would say even when it's not going great, it's still better than the alternative to me.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And I'll always remember that first time I got a paying client. And it wasn't for the estate sale business. It was for another one I ran as a side hustle. And I sent them a Stripe link. They put it in their credit card. Money hit the bank. I'm like, oh my God, I just made something out of nothing. I met some random person on the internet. They gave me money. And I'm like, okay, this is a lot simpler than I thought. And I think it's that hurdle of like, if you get your first dollar, it's like, okay, I get it now. Provide a
Yep.
service, provide a product, provide software, whatever it may be. Produce it for less than it costs you, and then sell it for more,
Yeah.
and you got a business. And I think the simplicity is like a big mental hurdle to go from there. And that's like the
100%.
simplicity of business. And I guess going to your next phase, which I'm interested in, I want to put a pin on that note that you have with all those business ideas, because hopefully towards the end you can share a couple of them that are keeping you up at night. Because I definitely have the same thing in my Notion app on my phone. But I also had an idea of going to real estate, and I was in real estate for a couple of years in commercial real estate when I came out of school. That's where I started my career. And my wife and I own a couple properties here in Toronto, Canada. We have 3 rental units and a house and stuff like that. And my mindset around real estate was there's a lot of rich people in real estate. There's tons of opportunity out there. Things are growing. Toronto at the time was a very hot real estate market, and it seemed like something that was very tangible and very easy to wrap my head around. And
Yep.
I still think it's a great industry, but for me, where I saw real estate was like, it's a set asset that is going to appreciate or depreciate at a certain percentage, and you're going to be able to make a certain capex on rent or whatever it may be. But it doesn't have that 10x multiplier, that 100x multiplier to be able to grow, which a business does or a brand does. But from your side of it in real estate, I think you brought up a really good point. It was like, from a risk perspective, especially in the development game, is like you are dumping a truck of money into this pit, and there's so many variables that need to go right for that to be successful. You have to sell out, you have to get all your permits, you have to build on time, the interest rates have to stay low so you can sell out and stuff like that. Like, what's your sort of learning if someone's thinking about real estate, of like how to either dip their toe in it or how they should think about a career in real estate?
Yeah, yeah. Well, on
And
the
sorry if
development side.
I'm giving you flashbacks and nightmares of being in the real
No, no,
estate
not at
industry.
all. Hey, listen, I've got a lot of fond memories of real estate, so it's not something that I look back in any sort of a negative way at all. But it is tough, and you've got to have the mindset of a problem solver, because if you don't, you will not survive. Because real estate is just a humongous puzzle of problem solving every day. Like you mentioned, from the moment you identify a piece of land to trying to get it under contract, to buying it, to getting it permitted, to then going through the process of developing the land, building something, and all the way to leasing it up and trying to sell it. There are a million problems, and that process usually lasts anywhere from, call it, 5 to 7 years from the very first minute to the end. And you've got to have a tolerance for the issues that are going to be coming at you every day. It's funny. I used to have a gentleman that worked for me in my previous development company, and he was a bit of a you know worrywart. He would just stress every day, and he would be like, I couldn't sleep last night thinking about X, Y, and Z. And I was like, I slept fine. I'm not worried about it. Like, we'll figure it out. But like, um, there are people that leave that business, or some not by their own choice, because they just can't handle that amount of continuous stress and problems. I know that's every business. All businesses have issues to solve. But in the real estate business, for example, different than beverage or other businesses that I'm aware of, it's also a very, very it's a tough business with a lot of negativity, and a lot of people out there that, I'm not going to say that they're bad people, but man, they don't do business. They're not out, ready to help everybody. There are a lot of folks out there that they're all trying to kind of get their piece of the pie, and so it's just a constant barrage of those issues to solve. And then you do have some bad actors out there you have to deal with as well. So it's just not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
It's a great business, but you have to be very, very smart about it. And I would say, if anything, who you do business with in real estate. I know that's every business, but in real estate, you get with the wrong folks, you can lose your ass. And I hate to say it, but I've got a lot of contemporaries that came and went in real estate because it's so easy to lose all your money.
Yeah.
And so you have to be ready for that level of commitment to the risk and to the problem solving, or else it's an impossible business to be successful in.
Yeah, for sure. And you brought up an interesting point that a lot of people I don't think consider is the timeline. Is if you're starting up a beverage brand, or you're starting up an e-commerce brand, or you're starting up a services business, you can start it up and it's not working in a month, 6 months, a year, shut it down, whatever it may be. If you have to write off inventory, or you got to lay off employees, at the end of the world. You can't just shut down a real estate project. And if you try to, you're going to be stuck with a lot of money coming out of your pocket. And it's a whole different game. And I think it's, as you said, like you have to have that risk tolerance, but you also have that strategic thinking up front of like, hey, and I did this with the first house that I bought, is like my strategy was I'm going to, at the time I was 26 or 7 or something when I bought the house, and I had my savings. I knew I could make the down payment, but I knew the carrying costs were going to be a lot. So I went through, and this was my hack at the time, is during the showing, I took pictures of the basement with the intention to rent it. and I put it on Facebook Marketplace to see what rental rate I can get before I put an offer on the house.
Oh, that's fun.
And I saw the carrying cost and I saw what my rental rate was going to be up. Like, okay, I can
Yeah.
afford this amount writing off the rent. And we rented it
Yeah.
for multiple years. We still have the house and we still rented the basement and the main floor separately. But I think if you don't do that work up front, you're just giving yourself the odds of being successful or just reducing from day one. And you sort of have to
Yeah.
build in as much cushion as possible to make you successful, because yeah, if you're not, it could be devastating.
Yeah, and you also you can't be half pregnant. You know, you're either all the way in or you're not. Like you said, you can't stop a development project. And
Yeah.
so the minute you buy that piece of property and you are working on that project, I mean, if you try to stop, like you said, you're going to lose everything. So it's a you got to be fully committed for the long
Yeah.
haul, and it's a grind. Yeah.
Yeah. You'll like this. It reminded me of it was a funny story. So the house that we didn't buy, we did the same thing. This was my strategy. I'm like, we're gonna rent out the basement no matter what. I want to understand what rental rates are. So we went into this one house and the ceilings, it was an old house and the ceilings were really low. I think it was like a 6 foot high ceilings. And I remember, and all my colleagues will remember this, I was a sales manager at the time of a software company, and I posted on Facebook Marketplace and I was getting calls nonstop, messages all nonstop. And my qualifying question to the potential tenants were, how tall are you? And all my sales reps are laughing at
Right.
me. They're like,
That's
what is
funny.
going on? Like, did you just become a real estate agent? Why are you asking people their
Yeah.
height? And I was trying to see if you could rent out a basement. It's only 6 feet tall. And yeah, it's these little things and these stories you think about retroactively. But if I didn't do that due diligence and then I put it to market, everyone who came to look at the listing would be like, what the hell? Like, I'm not living in a 6 foot high ceiling basement. Like, I'm never
Yeah.
going to rent this. And I would have been stuck with that piece running a
Yeah.
serious deficit. So yeah, it's just a funny story. I'm sure all my sales reps will remember it because they were laughing at me for the whole week I was taking calls. Luckily, we didn't buy the house, but
Yeah.
yeah, different problems. But
Well, yeah, some of the best deals you ever do are the ones you don't do.
100%.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
So there you go. So that's the real estate side of it. And now, like, you're gonna have to tell me that. So you always think about beverages, and first of all, two things is like, if anyone's listening, go to Freebird. I don't even know what the website is, freebird.com or what's the
Drinkfreebird.com.
drinkfreebird.com. You got to look at the branding, and you see the branding and it's like old school Americana. Like, I love it. It's so patriotic, but it's
Thank you.
not like obnoxious new patriotic. It sort of has this like retro feel to it. And I really love the branding, which is one thing
Thank
that
you.
caught my eye. The second thing that caught my eye is your personal branding on LinkedIn specifically is where I was exposed to it. So from, I guess, give me the initial story in terms of the manufacturing and how that came to be. And I'd love to hear how your brain thought through the branding, because I'm not a branding guy. When I started Talently, I paid some guy on Fiverr $500 and I said, hey, come up with a logo, come up with the color scheme, just put a website up. I don't really care. I'm a sales guy. I go hustle. I don't really care what it looks like. I'll make it happen. But clearly in this industry, you have to think about branding. And yeah, I'd love to hear your thought process of like how it began and what your branding strategy was.
Sure, sure. So yeah, so as I mentioned that I'd always been thinking about the beverage category and in particular water. And the reason I like the water business is different than say Pepsi and Coke. You're typically going to buy a Pepsi or a Coke because of your specific taste preference. That's what it's going to be. You're going to buy a Sprite or a, whatever, ginger ale because you like one better than the other. In the water business, while we certainly, and I can talk about it in a minute, we've got a fantastic source of spring water and it tastes amazing. But a lot of people's buying decisions in water are based upon what they see on the product, whether it's the bottle or the can, et cetera. And so sort of the opposite of what you said, my brain goes straight to brand, straight to the visuals. That's where my head is. And so how I got started was I literally just became a beverage nerd and started just going to the end of the internet on a regular basis, reading everything I could to figure out what I wanted to do. And I realized that my thesis, I thought, was accurate, which was water's where it's at. That's where I want to go into. And you mentioned earlier liquid death. Liquid Death was the inspiration for my brand. Not because I am their customer. I'm certainly not their target customer. Um, but what I saw was somebody doing an amazing job of branding and marketing and doing something that nobody else had done. And in doing so, they effectively created a new category of canned water at the time. Now they've got a lot larger array of products, but at the time they were just water. And they created this very brand centric beverage brand where at the beginning they rarely even spoke about the water. It wasn't really even about the water. Even today, their brand is still more about their brand than the products inside the actual cans. And so when I saw that level of success, I was like, wow, that's really, really interesting. First of all, I love the sustainability of the can. I mean, as you mentioned, our can, like we were able to sort of duplicate, at least from a size standpoint, the 19.2 ounces, which is their, typical size, their tall boy size, if you will. But what I wanted to do was think about all the people like myself who would love a beverage like Liquid Death, but maybe we're just not Liquid Death people.
Yeah.
They have a niche that they are absolutely devoted to, and they lean in very hard to that niche, and they own it. But there's a lot of other people out there that would love something like that, but maybe they just don't like Liquid Death.
Yeah,
So that's
you're not like showing up to your kid's soccer game slamming a Liquid Death. It might throw the other parents off.
100%.
Yeah,
And also, it scales very heavily male. And so I also thought of that component, like not being so heavily male skewed where, a soccer mom would love it. So anyway, so to,
yeah.
to,
Can
to further
I
answer, yeah,
as
please.
an outsider,
Yeah.
I'm interested to, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. So
Okay.
I saw the brand, read the website, whatever, saw what it is, and my mind naturally gravitated towards a group of people or an identity. And I want to tell you where my head's at, and you tell me how
Okay.
accurate. We should both write it down on a piece of paper and flip it at the same time to see if it's accurate. But um, my mind went to two things. Is like one, it went to like middle America, like not coastal California, not New York, not kind of that stuff. So that's the persona I'm looking for. And really, my snap reaction was like backyard barbecues and people who like fishing and hunting and stuff like that. That was like my first snap reaction. And it's so interesting for me because I'm not a brand guy. When you consciously think about brand, it's so important to the association and group association. But if it's done correctly, it just feels natural and it doesn't feel like it's forced. Like everyone knows that Liquid Death is for a certain group of people. Everyone knows that Nike's for a certain group of people. And it's sort of this unconscious tie. So going back to my point, you tell me if I'm on a scale from 1 to 100, how accurate I am. It's like outdoor fishing, hunting, that kind of stuff, and backyard barbecues is really like the group of people that I identified with.
Yeah. You're basically 100,
Yeah.
because we, in the back of my mind, when this honestly happened to me at 4 a.m. That's the story. At 4 a.m, I had the epiphany, and I had it in my head. Small town America, everyday heroes. Your firefighters and your policemen and your teachers and your first responders, backyard barbecues, hunting, fishing, tailgating at a football game. All of those things are just sort of American ideals, if you will, sort of the cornerstone of what the country's about. Um, and, you know, I also come from a family where, my parents and grandparents, a lot of them lived in like southern towns, farm towns, small towns, and they're salt of the earth people, but most of them are the backbone of the country. They're the ones that make this country grow and and allow the country to work. They're doing all the hard work actually. So the things that you have said are exactly spot on. That is precisely our thought process, the Americana vibe, the nostalgia of it. All of that is
Yeah, that's good to hear that. Well, your branding's working. I didn't do anything. I just saw it and I had a an association.
Well,
Um,
by the way, and if I may add, one of the things I think that's so critical about a brand, and Liquid Death does this great, is when you don't have to figure it out. Like you didn't try to figure it out, but immediately you sort of
yeah,
saw it and identified with that's probably what it is, and you were right.
yeah,
You know, I'm not patting myself on the back by saying this. I'm more patting, you know, my designer and creative people who have helped me along the way. But you know, we once we created this, we kind of knew, I think we got something here. And your reaction is very similar to a lot of other people, so it's refreshing.
yeah, for sure. Well, I'm happy that I'm happy I could regurgitate the brand that you guys were
Me
going for,
too.
but that means that the designers they get all the credit. Jay gets no credit.
That's right. That's fine.
And I want to continue down this path, but it's super interesting for me is like one thing I wanted to ask you about, and I want to also get into the distribution side of it and like how to actually grow the brand. Because that's the hard part. I want to ask you specifically about trends. The trends of non-alcoholic mocktails and looking it up right now, like in 2023 was the first time since 1999 that beer sales in the US has declined. Um, we look at the larger market, like did the trend of non-alcoholic and people moving away from alcohol, like how much did that play into your decision? Is that something you think about, or it's sort of just a cherry on top, or what's your take on that? I'm sure you have a finger on the pulse.
Yeah, you're right. And I feel like there's sort of two parts to that. One is I think I'm just lucky timing wise. That always helps. Um, and then the flip side of that was not necessarily paying so much attention to the trends as much as I paid attention to the market size. So, for example, in the non-alcoholic space, there are so many new beverages coming out like on a weekly basis. It's impossible to keep up. They're everywhere, and they're all the different categories of, you know, seltzers and hemp infused and adaptogens and all these different things, and a lot of really unique great brands, but a lot of them have very narrow lanes, that they either have to own their lane or they're going to have a hard time. And that's one thing I love about water. You know, on one hand, people say, well, why would you go and sort of swim with the whales of all these humongous companies that own these huge water companies? Uh, and my answer is simple, that if I own 1% of the category of water, I can retire tomorrow.
Yeah.
1%.
If you own like
So
0.1%, you could still run a great business.
that's right. That's right. And so that's sort of my thought process. The trends are the trends. They're going to change on a regular basis. So I'm more focused on just keeping my head down and doing what we do, and the trends will take care of themselves. But if we have a great product that resonates with people, then I shouldn't have to worry so much about the trends.
Yeah, it's a healthy take, and I think for me emotionally, like you see trends or I see trends, and I get excited. I'm like, okay, the momentum's going that way. But I guess to your point,
Yeah,
even if beer was growing in consumption, the water market's still as big as it is, and it's going to continue to grow with the population. That it doesn't really make a difference if beer and alcohol consumption goes up or down. The market's still huge, and like drawing
right.
parallels to my business and where I see the trend is a little bit more unique. Like I run my company Talently is an offshore staffing firm in South Africa. So we like help North American companies hire amazing talent in South Africa who work remote. Before COVID, like 2019, this would have been a crazy concept. It would have been a much harder business to run and scale. But since the evolution and adoption of remote work, if you're based in Atlanta and someone's working and lives in Augusta with masters around the corner, doesn't matter if they're working in Augusta remotely or they're in Cape Town remotely, they're still remote. It doesn't really make a difference. So the appetite for people to hire and bring on remote employees has drastically changed. And
Yeah,
this business would still exist without that change, but the fact that that change happened makes it a lot easier, and the growth and the TAM is a lot higher. So industry to industry, obviously trends matter, but they're not deal breakers in certain industries. But it's
correct.
always interesting to see what's going on, and you have to be aware of them. But as long as you don't get too high or too low emotionally with those trends, I think that's like the healthy way to think about it.
Well, the other thing is, you know, it takes a little time to start a new business, whether, it's beverage or something else. And so you may be trying to go after a trend, but by the time you get through the whole process of getting the business started, that trend may be dying out.
Yeah.
So, water is not going to die out. Water is not going to go anywhere. So I feel like that's a fortunate thing for us. And the other thing that we have that's very fortunate for us is that there aren't other brands of spring water in a can. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So in addition to having the branding that we have, we also have a product that is unique in itself because there just isn't other um, brands out there competing with us. So it's
Yeah.
it's it's a good place to be.
For now. I mean, who knows? Once Freebird gets big, everyone's going to chase you guys down. But
That's
uh,
okay.
yeah,
That's all right.
exactly. There's enough to go around for everybody. I feel the same way.
That's
It's
right.
like business. At least for me, when I thought about it, it's like you think business is, or at least I thought of business as a game with winners and losers. There's really no. It's not definitive. It's not binary. Everyone can be winners. There's different scales of winning, but it's really not a win-loss game. Especially if you're in big industries, it's like everyone
Yep.
can win, and everyone can win at a different scale, and everyone has different desires to win. Some people want to raise VC capital and they want to grow a huge brand and sell it to whatever Nestle, and some people want to run a business locally and support their family or whatever it may be. So there's different
Yeah.
scales of business, and I think mentally as a founder, you have to know what game you're playing and sort of gear your business to be successful there.
Yeah, and I think that what your point is absolutely spot on. I think people do get caught up in winners and losers, and that's one thing that's so refreshing about the beverage business is that there's a lot of because it's a tough business and because so many businesses don't make it. There's a lot of camaraderie within the beverage space where there's support for other businesses. I've felt it so much. It's been a surprise and it's made me equally willing and desiring to help others and to support them because it's not easy. It's not it's expensive. It's risky. All these things that you hear are the truth, but also doing good business is still doing good business. And so
Yeah.
I'm not out to quote beat everybody. It wouldn't be bad, but I'm more interested in just building a great company that's successful and being able to have a team of folks that contributes to that and just do good business out there. I think
Yeah.
if you have that long term perspective, then you're more than likely to have a better chance of being successful.
Yeah, for sure. You got to start like a beverage support group on the side for everyone, and
Yeah, I
so they're
think
gonna
that
have
could.
sleep. Yeah, to ruin their sleepless nights and make sure that everyone's got their support and can vent to each other because, yeah, support network's good and people need to know what you're going through. But
Well,
beverage
not to,
support
but
group's the next plan.
For sure. And that's one of the cool things about LinkedIn that you mentioned because, I've met a lot of people on LinkedIn and it's nice to be able to, it's a business site. So you're sharing information and you're learning, but you also, LinkedIn is also personal. You end up knowing people and learning and talking to them about their successes and their failures. And, it's a nice place because I think that you can really, have some bonds there that are difficult to establish otherwise. So it's pretty unique.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think it's a very slept on channel and continues to be slept on. So the more you share,
Agreed.
the more you get out of it. And as you said, you gain clients, you can gain confidants, you gain friends. Like it's an amazing place to be. And
Yeah,
if you treat other people well and you help other people, like it will come back to you in spades.
100%.
Okay, now let's get into the nitty gritty part, and then I want to pick your brain on a couple business ideas. So hopefully, I plant that seed in the back of your head that you can give us, I don't know, one or
Sure.
two great business ideas that you're thinking about. But my head and my background is always in sales. And I know how to sell software, I know how to sell services. You're selling beverages. And to me, coming up with the brand and figure out the manufacturing and stuff like that, that is a foreign concept. But the hard part is getting it on shelves, getting it into customers' homes, and especially with a product that's heavy and is costly to ship.
Yep.
Um, what is your distribution channel? Are you working on direct to consumer? Are you trying to go straight to wholesalers or big box and stuff like that? What does that look like?
Yeah. So our initial plan, which fortunately so far has kind of played out as we had hoped, was to start D2C. We have our Shopify website at, drinkfreebird.com. I knew that that was not going to be where we make our money because it's just too difficult. Like you said, shipping costs. It's a hard thing to make work. So the next stepping stone was Amazon. We recently got on Amazon. We're Amazon Prime, and so even though you obviously have to pay, Amazon part of what you're making there, the convenience of it is great for our consumers. It's just easier.
Yeah. And is that
But
fulfilled? That's fulfilled by Amazon?
And so, and then the third tier is what you mentioned, which is distribution. And so, we literally just in the last few weeks have signed up two distributors. One called United Distributors out of Atlanta, and they cover Georgia and Alabama. And then another one, RS Lipman, that's based out of Tennessee. And so we've got 3 states so far. That was our goal, start off in the Southeast and slowly build. And so, the cool thing about dealing with distribution companies, especially the high quality ones, and these two are as good as it gets, allows you to very quickly get on retail shelves. So we're going to go from right now being on one store shelf just as a test somewhere, to being in over 500 stores within 60 days.
Yeah.
So it's an enormous jump. It's super exciting. It's a little daunting. But that's there's a lot of ways to play the game, but I feel like that if you really want to do it right, you need to go find your distribution channels to get you into retail stores, because what'll happen is a lot of times in our case, for example, we're going to probably start off with more of a convenience store type of focus.
Yeah.
Then lead into your big boxes, your grocery and your Walmarts, that kind of thing. So it's a gradual progression, and you have to. It's actually a really challenging concept to know when to kind of go big and when to stay small, because it's very expensive to go bigger. But at the same time, you get that platform. If all of a sudden you're in Walmart everywhere, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's an expensive proposition. And if you're not able to support that correctly with your marketing efforts and with your boots on the ground, all those things, then you're going to make it difficult. So it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg. But if you're not methodical about the formula, then it can be real tough. So I'm not suggesting, by the way, that I know the exact formula. I've got some great partners that have been in the trenches, so they're very helpful, and we're going to navigate it the best we can. The best news is that we have gotten an enormously positive reception. As my partners put it, who have been in the beverage business for a long time, like, this never happens. So, soak it up, enjoy it, and let's roll.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we are.
100%. No, I think that the cat and mouse sort of concept of growth is so applicable for you guys, because whatever you put it in 10 stores, okay, it sells out. Next time they want to triple their order, you got to go run that order again. You got to finance that PO. You got to get it out in stores. Okay, it sells through again. You got to do it again and again and again. And it continues to expand. And sometimes you can blow your load and get too big, and then you run yourself thin. But also, hopefully you get to the stage. But when you work with the big guys, I assume Walmart, Costco, that kind of stuff, they have all the purchasing power and you have zero power, and you're at their whim. And if they place an order and they decide to cancel it or whatever, like, you guys are out money and you got to figure it out. So it's a very dangerous game. But I guess your headset, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, is like, when you get these placements, you got to sell through. And if you don't sell through, you lose that relationship overnight. Like, is there a marketing plan? Is there a sales strategy? Like, how do you make sure sell-throughs happen? Because that's the most important thing. Is getting on the shelf is one thing, but once you're on the shelf, you want that product off the shelf because you want people buying it. Like, how do you make sure that happens?
Yeah. So it's a process. You have got to support the brand in the locations where you're starting. Like, for example, like if a brand just goes national right off the bat, likely there is some other factor contributing to that that's allowing them to do that because of some sort of exposure. Prime, for example, might not be my favorite product in the world, but they had some tremendous influencers with a lot of exposure,
Yeah.
allowed them to go national very quickly. I don't know how well they're selling today, but they certainly, shot out very quickly and did well. But most brands that are building for the long haul do it methodically and regionally, and they do it in such a way that allows them to support the brand primarily with boots on the ground, doing tastings, showing up at events, giving away product at, tailgates, as we talked about, in football games or fishing shows or whatever. There, you can run the gamut. Barbecues. You've got to you've got to support those local markets, because what happens is you build that credibility and you just gradually, you branch out beyond that regionally. So you go from, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee to all of a sudden you got South Carolina and Florida, and North Carolina. And you
Yeah.
do that same process over and over and over until you get to a point where now, oh goodness, you've got a third of the country. So now that exposure's, getting there where you want it to be. So then maybe you start doing some marketing efforts that are a little bit more global in nature versus local, but you're still going to support it locally as well. So
Yeah.
you're constantly navigating all the different channels. Social's very, very important. And your ad strategy is important. There's a lot of layers. It's a complex business
Yeah, and I've all
to say
said
the
at
least.
every stage of it. And I don't know, it reminds me of, and speaking about sell-through, have you ever heard you know who Sarah Blakely is? Have you ever heard her story of how she got into her first department store?
I know. Yeah, I know the whole story. And in fact, before I recently moved, she lived right down the street from me.
No
So,
way. Yeah, I
yeah.
remember.
So,
I think it was on How I Built This. She was the guest on it, and she was talking about the story of how she got into Neiman Marcus with
yeah,
Spanx. And for anyone who's
yeah,
listening, Sarah Blakely is a founder of Spanx, which is a shapewear brand.
yeah.
And she said, like, she was banging on the door, emailing every day to get a meeting with the buyer. She got a meeting with the buyer, and her sales pitch at the time is like she had the pitch. No one really got it for shapewear. And then I think she went to the washroom and changed into her own shapewear and showed the buyer what it looked like on. And she got her first placement in Neiman Marcus, which was her dream to be in this big box retailer. And then she stressed about selling through because no one knew who she was. And she showed up, I think she did for like 2 weeks or 2 months or something like that. And she showed up that Neiman Marcus day every single day, paid her friends to come in and buy the gear. She would stop people in the store and tell them to come try on Spanx and help them to sell it. And like, if the sell through works, it works. It doesn't matter how you got to get it done, how you have to get it done. You just have to do it. And it was really like an amazing story of a true hustler and how she made it happen to get the meeting in the first place,
Yep.
make the sale, and then make sure the sell through happens. Because to your point, it's like there's always different phases to, and you can't go into every convenience store in the world and make sure that Freebird's bought, but you can definitely do it early on to sort of do things that don't scale and make sure it's successful.
Well, you know what? So first of all, I love her story, admire her whole entrepreneurial journey because it's been amazing. Her and her husband both, Jesse Itzler, they're a dynamic duo for sure, and they've done some amazing things. And being in Atlanta, I see a lot more of that firsthand. So,
Yeah, fair
um,
enough. You're right. They're
yeah,
Atlantic people.
yeah, and they're nice. They're real nice folks, good family folks, all that kind of stuff. But to your point, yeah, what she did was amazing, and it was one store, right? One store that she just kept going back and making that work. And for us, it's a little less easy to do, because when you got 500 convenience stores in a state, you can't
Yeah.
necessarily go stop by them, once
You
a
gotta
day.
go around and sponsor or pay little league teams to go after their games and clear out Freebird or something like that.
Hey, listen, that's the interesting thing is, the good news is there are a lot of ideas like that one, that are on our list to do. The bad news is that how many ideas? It's like we can't do them all, and how do
Yeah.
we do them? Logistically, how do we do them? But that also it comes back to having a great distribution partner, because they're also willing to contribute resources, and put people on the ground to help support the brand, because obviously they want it to be successful as well. So it's a team effort. Our team at Freebird will have to grow over time, but I relish that, because that's a great problem to have. If we can justify the growth, it means that we're having the type of velocity and sales that we hoped for. And it's just up to us to support it. And if that means that I got to get in my car and drive to 50 stores in a 2-day period, then so be it. I'll do it. That's just the way you do it. So,
Yeah,
but
100%.
that's the best part, meeting the actual people in the stores that are selling. You go to some convenience store where maybe it's some mom and pop that they've owned it for 50 years, and you go in there and shake their hand and make an appearance. It means something to them. They're that much more willing to push your product because they're like, wow, he drove 5 hours to come say hello to us and thank us for selling his product. So there are
Yeah.
little things like that again, like you said, it's impossible to do all of it, but you want to do your best to try to show your appreciation for the stores so that they'll in turn push your product.
Yeah, 100%. And you have to do early on, you have to do things that don't scale, but you have to do the human thing. And I think it's interesting in business. Like I'm banging away on my computer on calls all day and you don't really realize the impact of what you're doing. But in our business, when we get people jobs, they come back, they're so appreciative, they write reviews, whatever. And it's like you're actually making an impact on people's lives. And the same thing with you is like you're banging away on calls, doing things, working on POs, whatever it may be. And then you go to the store or you see someone on the street holding your product, like that's got to feel great. So it's
It
seeing
feels
it in real life is incredible.
It feels absolutely amazing, Dan. In fact, if there is the most gratifying component of this business, and there's a lot of them, but one of them is exactly what you described, is unsolicited people reaching out to me all the time, telling me, "Hey, I just bought your product and I love it. I
Yeah,
love the can, I love the design, I love the taste of the water, I love it." And I've told my friends about it. Like, that makes me feel so good because most often it's people I don't know who they are. I have no idea who these people are, and they've taken it upon themselves to reach out to say good things. Gosh, it just feels good because it's like, wow, okay, this brand speaks to them. That's what we were trying to do. So that's great. Mission accomplished,
yeah,
so
that's
it's awesome.
awesome.
It's a good
Yeah,
feeling.
it's that's great. And you came up with whatever ideas to help you scale and stuff like that. I think it's a good transition to sort of finish off here from one founder, one entrepreneur to another. I always love to hear where people's heads are at, and there's so many things that are going on in the world. You're in the beverage, e-commerce, like distribution space. I'm in the services space. I know a ton of people in AI and software and stuff like that. I would love to hear from you. What if you weren't doing this? Like, what's the one big idea or business that you think someone could run with, or you think there's a huge opportunity and that is in that notepad in front of you or in your phone that you're thinking about all the time?
Yeah. Well, so I'll answer the question first by saying, honestly, if I could do anything, I'm doing it. Like,
Yeah,
that's the beauty of this business. I am literally doing something that I love to do. So let's hope I can do it for a long time. But in the meantime, one idea that I had recently, and this is really getting in the weeds of where my brain goes, which is I don't recommend anybody going. But it was a couple of years ago where the hearing aid business changed because hearing aids went from being all prescription based to being able to be bought over the counter or just online, on the internet. And so I did what I always do, which is I went into my rabbit hole and, reached the end of the internet of hearing aid information and realized that like 5 companies dominated like 95% of the business. So my idea was I'm going to create some Apple like hearing aids that look cool, that come in a great box, that have the audio components that are necessary. And I'm going to charge half the price because they're very expensive and most of the time not covered by insurance. So that was my idea. And I literally went down the rabbit hole and, had a friend of mine that we talked about going into business and, I guess it would be, it's not very sexy, but the market was humongous, and I know a lot of other companies have done it, and I don't regret not doing it because it's one of those categories where the main reason I didn't do it was because, unlike beverage, which is a little bit easier, at least to figure out from a more, call it, practical standpoint, there's a lot of components of hearing aids that are
yeah.
scientifically beyond my
Hardware,
knowledge.
hardware is a tough
Yeah,
business. No,
that's
but
right.
I think it's great. I think it's a great idea, and obviously there's going to be winners in that space. But yeah, you have to
Yeah.
be good at marketing. You have to be good at hardware and stuff like that. But I think that the theme that you just brought up is really interesting. Is like the shift in health is like one. This is used to be prescribed, now it's over the counter, which is an interesting sort of trend for people to keep an eye on. The other thing, and I just thought of this on the spot, which is I think in a lot of things in health, there's a shift in social acceptance or availability to certain things. And the first that come to mind is like on the female side, Botox is just commonplace. Everyone knows about Botox. Everyone wants to do Botox or has been exposed to Botox. And for me,
Yep.
I'm surprised there's not like an established brand, Botox clinic brand or whatever, where it popped up in every city and it's a beautiful space and it's trustworthy and it has, because right now, like
Yep.
the world of Botox is just through word of mouth. There's like one person does it or one person gets told by a doctor, this is a great place to go do it. And a friend does it and then they tell someone else. But why isn't there like a Cleveland clinic for Botox? I think there's an opportunity there. And on the other side of it, that's more female focused. But the other side, on the male side, which at least that I see, I'm 34 years old, and I know a bunch of people who've done this, is hair transplants. Is hair the concept of a hair transplant is becoming more accessible, more common in dialogue. People are flying to Istanbul, Turkey, which is like the hair transplant capital of the
I've
world.
seen some of those videos.
Because
Yeah.
it's so cheap there.
Funny. Yeah.
But if this is what the social acceptance is and people's desires, there has to be an opportunity to build a reputable hair transplant brand in North America, where people can walk in and get the treatments that they want, know that they have trustworthy doctors that specialize in this. And these are massive, massive, massive businesses. Like you can charge a ton for this. And the market is, going back to the idea of trends, is only going in that direction. But I think you brought up the idea of like medical shifts, from over the counter to prescription over the counter. But I think the other side is just like social perception of certain medical treatments.
No, I love that. In fact, believe it or not, I had the discussion with some folks about the Botox thing, exactly what you're talking about, because I think that's a massive opportunity. And I think what it is, it's removing the stigma of the quote medical component of it and making it more, you know, acceptable from getting those kind of treatments, but also back to sort of where my brain goes to the marketing side of it, like marketing it not so medical. It's
Yeah.
more of a, like you said, like the Botox kind of places. Those would be more like spas almost, and there's those kind of opportunities. I think about those kind of things all the time. And quite frankly, I have to shut my brain off because I got to focus. I got to focus on this baby.
Yeah, exactly. One thing at a
It's,
time, but for
yeah,
your next endeavor. But it's the same thing. Is I think once you get into it, it's a good thing to practice. Is like see an opportunity, write it down, or think about it as a business opportunity. Doesn't mean you have to do it, but I think it's a really good exercise to get comfortable with business ideas, doing deep dives, and learning different things. And you can learn what you like, what you don't like, whatever. It doesn't mean you have to go start a Botox clinic, but if you continue to have that eye for opportunity, I think there's no downside. And there's only upside if you do want to run with it, or you want to be exposed to it, or you want to work in that industry, you want to invest in that industry. You have to have your eyes open to it. So yeah,
and you got to be
you just
curious.
sparked ideas for me through the hearing aid. But yeah, maybe your next endeavor will be in Botox or hair transplants.
Well, you know what? I think that it comes down to being curious. I think that one of the aspects, going back full circle to the very beginning of the conversation about being an entrepreneurs being curious. And if you have a curious mindset and you're just interested to know how things work or how things get started, or maybe you have an idea and you want to research it, the best news in the world is just get on Google, get on Chat GPT, and you can learn so much and you can figure it out. Sometimes you might think something sounds cool, but then you get into the nitty gritty of it and you're like, maybe that's not for me. But being curious allows you to open your eyes to a lot of cool potential opportunities.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's a good place to end it. Some teaser of different business ideas, but yeah, Jay, I really
Yep.
appreciate you jumping on and sharing your story of where you came from and what you're doing now. And I'm a big fan of the brand and Freebird, and I think it's going to be a huge success. So I appreciate you jumping on, and always good to connect with other founders.
Thank you, Dan. Well, it's been a pleasure. I love the conversation. I could have this kind of conversation all day, every day with somebody. So it's a lot of fun, and I'm very grateful for you having me on.
There you go. I appreciate it. Well, we'll speak soon and keep in touch.
Okay, take care.